Hi, everyone. It's Joe Veneri, the host of Fit Insider, the show where I talk with the entrepreneurs, executives, and investors who are redefining the business of fitness and wellness. Today, I'm joined by Jon Carder. Jon is the co-founder and CEO of Vessel, an at-home diagnostics company helping users optimize their health. In this episode, we talk about using blood and urine testing to measure biomarkers, how Vessel sold 100,000 test kits as part of a pre-order campaign. Jon shares his plan to launch a connected health tracking toilet, and we discuss the company's mission to put a diagnostic lab in the palm of every hand. A quick reminder before we get into today's show. Every Tuesday, we send a weekly newsletter filled with insights and analysis on the business of fitness and wellness. Join other decision makers and industry operators by subscribing at insider.fit.co. Let's get into it. Hi, Jon. Welcome to Fit Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Looking forward to the conversation here today. And I think just to get things started, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about Vessel?
Sure. My name is Jon Carder. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO here at Vessel. And what Vessel is doing is it's bringing the lab into the home, or put another way, a lab into your hand. What it is, it's a little test card about half the size of your cell phone. You pee on the end of it for about 5 seconds, and then you wait 3 minutes for it to activate. You scan it with your smartphone, and you immediately get results, sort of what's going on inside your body. So we tell you your magnesium levels, vitamin C, B7, B9, pH, cortisol for stress, hydration, and both types of ketones, ketone A and ketone B. And you'll get these results laid out in a simple to understand fashion, sort of low, good, or high. And if you happen to have any of the results that are off, like low, in some cases high is bad, like cortisol, we'll build recommendations for you to know exactly how to improve those levels. So recommendations are broken down into 3 areas, sort of food, supplement, and lifestyle. On the food side, it gets kind of cool. It ranks every food you would find at a grocery store, ranked based on your body's nutrient deficiencies. So you can select the food you want from that list. You can add it to a grocery list, or you can click a button and Amazon Fresh will deliver it right to your door in a couple of hours. So you can kind of eat intelligently based on a lab test you just did at your house. The supplement side is kind of the same. We tell you exactly how many milligrams you need of these supplements based on your results. So you'll end up with some kind of really precise formula, like you might need 23 milligrams of B7 and 164 milligrams of magnesium. You can go buy that at a store as well, but it's kind of tricky to get the perfect formula. So we built this Vessel capsule, or we call it Vessel Fuel. It's filled with the exact formula that you need. So you just take that, 1 to 2 of those a day, and every month we update the formula for you based on your most recent results. Kind of makes the whole process really easy. And then the last recommendation engine is around some lifestyle changes. So if you're dehydrated, we'll tell you down to the ounce how much water you need to drink. If your cortisol levels are off, we'll give you a menu of sort of research-backed ways to improve cortisol, things like cardio, meditation, yin yoga, and we'll tell you, down to the sessions and how many minutes you need to hopefully improve those levels. The idea being, you take all these recommendations, you build sort of the perfect plan for you, then you execute on it and you test yourself. We recommend once a week. You can test yourself once a month, or even some people are testing, once a day. But the idea is you can actually see if these things are working. Is the supplements you're taking actually improving your levels? What about the, cardio? Is it helping with cortisol? You can typically improve your levels in 2 to 4 weeks on nutrients, in about 1 to 3 months on cortisol, and hydration in sort of 1 to 2 days. So each has sort of different time periods. But that's the idea. And yeah, it's about $10 a test. So super affordable. And it takes less than 10 minutes. So I'll pause there, but that's the Vessel in a nutshell.
Yeah, I appreciate that breakdown. And I want to even dissect it further. I think it's an exciting time and kind of much needed, given, to your point, like, are the things that we're doing actually working, and how do we know? So when, I was doing a little bit of digging ahead of today's show, and it looks like the company initially started, it was called Bloom, and you raised, a couple $1 million to get going. And then now, more recently, as Vessel, you announced in total $14 million, I think $8 million in fresh capital, which is a big number for like the early stage. Can you just take us behind the scenes? What went into maybe that decision to rebrand, how you initially then started getting traction among users, and so much so that it lends itself to, a big investment at the early stage?
Yeah, so we started 4 years ago, and the founding story is I was at a friend's birthday party, and I was actually talking about this idea of the lab moving into the home. I'd seen a lot of like cool, promising stories about smart toilets and other things like that. Nobody had actually built anything yet, but I just thought it was a really interesting concept. I was talking with someone about it, and my co-founder Matt overheard it, and he jumped in and said he was also fascinated by the concept. I'm an entrepreneur by trade. This is company number 5, and it's been about 22 years building mostly tech companies. And Matt is an engineer and a scientist. So he's sort of the perfect yin to my yang. And he's like, I can help you build it if you can, build the company around it. And so we started working on it. Our first hire was a chemical engineer, PhD. He's now still our chief science officer. And he works out of a few labs now by Lehigh University to build all of the assays that are actually on the test card. And so it takes a while to build those assays. They're kind of like building vaccines. So each one can take 12 to 18 months. But here we are, 4 years later, and we've got a dozen of them built, and we're building more as we speak. Sodium, iron, B12, those are all coming soon. And I think that's, the main reason why you see as much funding as you see, because this company, it has tech company elements. So we have an app, a really beautiful app that kind of shows your results and helps you build a plan around the recommendations. But we also have a science department. We have 3 labs where we build these assays out in partnership with Lehigh University. And then we also have engineering. So the test card itself has some expense to make that whole thing work, and the microfluidics and the fiducials and other things that are on the test card. And the last piece, of course, is manufacturing. So it's a combination of 2 worlds. A lot of times you see this kind of technology just existing in sort of a med tech, sort of maybe a B2B play that goes to hospitals. And then, a technology company will just have the app. We've really blended those 2 worlds together, and they're actually working really well together. Everybody has respect for the other side because we've never really worked closely with them. And both sides take a lot of experience and skill. It's been cool to blend those together, but that's definitely the reason we needed to raise a bit more to get up and running. And I'm happy to tell you about some of the traction we've gotten so far, which I think also helped a lot with the funding. If that's
absolutely, fire away. So, and that's what I saw too. Again, it's been a little bit of a time in the making, developing this technology and getting it out there. But then it seems like since you have, it's been really well received. So yeah, fill us in.
Yeah. So what we did was, before we were going live, we wanted to see how the market would respond to the product. We did a lot of consumer studies early on, and that's actually what led us into the test card to begin with. My original vision was a device that attaches to the toilet and has a little arm that swings out and sort of turns any toilet into a smart toilet. We actually have a patent on that now. We built a fully working prototype. It's pretty cool, and that'll come out in about a year. But what we learned is when we talked to consumers, did studies with hundreds of them, they really like this cheaper $10 test card to start. It's not another device in their home. It wasn't, $200 or $300. And so we pivoted to launching with the test card and then bringing in the hardware device later, which I think was the right move. And then we wanted to see how much demand there was for the test card itself. So we launched an Instagram and a Facebook campaign. And this was a pre-order campaign. So we would say, shipping timelines are 6 months or more. But you do have to pay to get in line, so to speak. You have to buy the products. We wanted people to actually, if you do a survey telling them, are you likely to buy? It's very different than saying, hey, this isn't going to ship for 6 months, but would you like to buy it anyways? I think the indicator is so much more real on when you're actually doing pre-orders like that. And it blew us away in terms of how well people responded. Thought we'd do about 5,000 orders, maybe, or 5,000 test cards, maybe 10,000. We ended up selling 100,000 test cards. We had to pause the pre-order campaign because we have to manufacture 100,000 cards, and we knew that was going to take us 2 to 3 months. And if we sold, 200,000, it'd be 6 months manufacturing ramp before we were able to, technically launch and have, real-time shipping. And so that was a really good sign. It was also a great sign just around the CAC on Facebook and Instagram was actually below the first order the average order value. So that got investors really excited. And I think the last part for us, which really helped us secure the funding, this last round of funding, was in terms of retention. So the way that we sell this product is still early in our life cycle to really truly understand lifetime value and retention numbers. But an indicator of that is on our membership. So we sell month-to-month memberships, but you can also sign up for 6 months or 12 months, and you can save 20 and 30% respectively. And what's happened there is over 60% of all orders are signing up for 6 and 12 months, and over 40% of orders are signing up for 12 months. So that's our most popular item on the site. That was also quite surprising. And I think just an indicator that people, they think of wellness as like a journey. It's not just a destination. You don't test yourself once and suddenly you're like, oh, I know where I'm at. Like, I'm good. It's something that you're constantly trying to optimize. And you don't want to spend too much time and obsess over it, but you also need to spend enough time to make sure you can kind of keep your body in that zone where your brain is functioning as good as possible, where you're sleeping as good as possible, where you have the best energy levels, et cetera. So that was encouraging, and I think that's what got the round done.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of good problems to have in terms of, more demand than maybe you were ready for. I think an interesting piece there that you mentioned was in developing this idea, you thought, hey, maybe we'll do like a smart toilet, and collect urine that way. But now what it ended up being is like this test card that uses your phone. It's really easy to use, has this beautiful app, and it sits really nicely in like this broader wellness category. Whereas maybe like a smart toilet feels either medical grade direction, or it feels kind of like biohacker, which is like a completely different audience, doesn't quite get into what is like the massive wellness market. Did you think about that as you were developing this, or was it kind of just like almost a happy accident that you ended up going the direction of the card, or was that a conscious decision to target that market?
Yeah, it was originally the idea of the smart toilet was selfishly motivated. I personally wanted the ability to be able to test myself, just by pushing a button and peeing on a little arm that would swing out. So I just thought it was the most amazing thing. And if I love it, there's got to be a lot of other people that love it. But then eventually we got disciplined and actually did a full-blown, customer study. And we did both the surveys, and we also sat behind some mirrored glass. We hired an agency to help us with all of that. And just in general, that was a really good investment because, it was painful for me to hear. I remember the first time I heard that, like, well, what if we just did a pee strip? I'm like, a pee strip? I'm like, what? Why would we have this manual process when we can automate the whole thing? And by the way, keep in mind that we already had a working prototype. So we were very close to like starting development on a full blown like manufacturing line for this device. And I was like, we can automate the whole thing. But I think you really have to stay humble as an entrepreneur and kind of, really listen to the customer, because the majority of the customers, while there was, 20, 30% that would absolutely buy the hardware device and would love it, the, 80% of the consumers were up for buying a test card. So it became clear to us that instead of a niche market with the hardware device, we could actually have something that would appeal to, and what we've learned from Facebook is we have 50 million people on Facebook that fit within our target audience of sort of general health optimizers. These are people that want to be healthier because they know it makes them feel better. They might be taking a supplement or a multivitamin. They might have a Fitbit or an Apple Watch. They're not super hardcore, but they're generally trying to optimize their health. Those people love this $10, test card. And so do the hardcore users. So do the, athletes. We're talking to NFL teams and major professional sports teams. They want to use it multiple times a day. So it still appeals to the hardcore user, but we just expanded the appeal by turning it into a test card rather than a hardware device. And that, again, was painful to hear at first because I really wanted the hardware device. But it also made a lot of sense when I really let it sink in and I really put the customer first ahead of my own desires. And the great thing is we're still going to launch the hardware device. It's just a strategy to get to market where you get the test card in their hands. They start getting used to collecting the data. And they're like, oh, this data is actually incredibly helpful and really valuable. And then all of a sudden you drop in and now you can automate the whole thing. Just invest, $200 or $300 and you get this amazing device that attaches your toilet, and they're going to be like no brainer because they've already felt, how good it feels to optimize these levels. So really it's kind of like a feeder system. And it's almost like the reverse of the Tesla model. We're going in with the cheaper one that kind of gets out to the mass. And once the mass understands the value of the product, then we bring on the expensive device that sort of automates the process for them. So it just makes it easier. It actually makes it cheaper too. The hardware device has a reel-to-reel system, so you don't need individual test card plastic, and you don't need individual test card manufacturing costs. So the per test price goes down once you invest in the hardware. So excited to get that out to market. And just listening to the customer definitely changed our path.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It's obviously happening a little bit now, and not a little bit, quite a bit in the fitness space. Connected fitness, you have the, hardware, but then you also have the digital app that's a little bit less expensive. Now we're doing that with a connected toilet, essentially, where you're doing the testing right within there. Also have the, lower price test strips to get people in. The answer to this might be obvious, but I wanted to maybe just hear how you thought through it and what the punchline is. Why the urine test and not a blood test as it relates to, you see a lot of the diagnostics at home, talking about these blood tests, you mail it in. It's obviously a lot more friction. I'm sure that's part of it, but just, why did it end up being the urine test and not blood?
Yeah, so I think everybody knows that blood is more comprehensive than urine, and we don't debate that. But the thing about urine is it's actually really good for certain markers, and it's a lot easier than blood. So blood obviously requires some kind of finger prick, and that scares the heck out of a lot of people. And just in general is a very high level of friction. Urine, we're already peeing that out every day. It's a natural thing that happens, and we're just trying to have you collect a little bit of that process. So for us, it was about the user experience. We wanted to start with urine because it's frictionless and because it can still track a lot of really important things like magnesium, like cortisol, like hydration. And in some cases, like hydration, it's better at tracking that than blood. You can't actually track blood hydration. So, we liked it for those reasons, and we're still going into blood. So our mission over the next 10 years is to put a lab in every hand. And in order to do that, you got to be beyond just urine and beyond just some of the wellness markers we do today. So blood, in fact, we've already done a blood test. We did a blood test for COVID antibodies, and we're submitting that to the FDA. We did a full clinical trial with the VA, and we've seen great results. Out of 100 people who tried to do this blood test on their own without any medical supervision, 97 out of 100 were able to do it correctly. And actually, two of the three that failed actually used an iPhone 5. They just broke protocol. They were supposed to use an iPhone 7 and above because of the camera. So they probably did it right as well. So we figured out how to enable people to do a blood test entirely at home, entirely on their own. It took forever to figure that out, by the way. Lots of different types of lancets and capillaries and other devices that you need to use to make this happen. But we just kind of dumbed it down, made it super simple, lots of really clear instructions, and everybody's, mostly everybody's able to do it. So hopefully we'll get approval on that. That would be our first foray into blood testing, but we want to do a lot more. There's vitamin D you can get from blood. You can't get that from urine because it's not water soluble. You can even get into stuff like cholesterol. It's quite a game changer once we bring blood into the mix. But urine, again, it's all about that strategy. Where do you start? Urine had lower friction and had really important metrics. So that seemed like the right place to go first.
Right. And so, whether it's the urine or the blood, basically building this platform for at-home testing and providing access to that, the next and potentially even as interesting piece is, what do you do with this information? You touched on it a little bit in the open around how you're making recommendations, but can you talk about that personalization piece from supplements to food to coaching? Like, how does that whole aspect around recommendations work?
Yeah, one of the things that's really important to me, and I think to our whole company, is we didn't want to just give a test result to show you a test results. We really wanted to get you to the point where you're feeling better. And that comes from actually my own experience as an entrepreneur, where I started my first company in college when I was 19 or 20, selling diapers out of my dorm room, dropped out, kind of typical entrepreneur story, had some successful exits, had some failures over the last 22 years. But when I hit sort of year 15, I was in my mid 30s. I'd been working 12 to 16-hour days for quite a while. And I started slowing down. I was like sleeping poorly. My energy levels were fluctuating. After lunch, I'd go into like food coma. I was like, wow, this is not how I used to feel. And I kind of assumed I was just getting older. And I think a lot of people assume that. Luckily, I had a friend say, hey, you should go get all your levels checked. You get more sensitive to things like your nutrient levels as you get older, and you might be able to feel better if you can optimize those. And so I did it. I got all the blood work done. It took me a while, weeks and weeks of driving to the doctors, driving to the labs, probably spent about $1,000. Found out I was low in B12, magnesium, had too much mercury in my system because I was eating too much sushi. Just some real simple changes to my diet and, a handful of supplements. And wow, it made a huge difference for me. And so for that reason, we wanted to make the app give you the recommendations you needed and really guide you and kind of hold your hand as you made these changes to either your diet or your lifestyle or to started taking some supplements. And then you could actually track if it actually got better. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. It's not about your test results. It's about you feeling and performing at your best. And so that's just been in our DNA. And these recommendations, they're tailored to each person individually. So the app will look very different for you based on your test results than it might look for a friend or a family member, because it's all personalized. Once we get that first batch of test results in, you get personalized food. So your list of food is every food ranked by, what you're deficient in. Your supplement formula is going to be very specific to, the stuff you're deficient in. And actually with the supplements, we make every bottle unique. Every capsule in there is unique to your specific formula. The bottle even comes with your name on it. And we adjust that formula as needed as you continue to test. So it's all very, very personalized based on data, because we want to make these recommendations actually work and we want you to feel better. And if you do, we know you're going to tell your friends, and Vessel is going to be a big success. So that's the key focus for us.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot happening now, and wanted to get your take on it. That personalized nutrition and personalization in general is basically like the holy grail. And you've seen it in the supplement space. Nestle acquires Persona, Bayer acquired Care of, and I think just this week, maybe or last week, Nature's Way acquired Bayes, who was doing blood testing for supplementation. And
I didn't see that.
Yeah, it was very recent. And at the same time, you have the movement towards the at-home testing and diagnostics, right? And you have companies as big as Everlywell, who I think now is $1 billion company, and as well as Base, who we had on the podcast doing some stuff around, a little bit more in like that optimization, human performance zone. When you think about this category, how do you see it playing out as it relates to, these big players, early startups? Where does Vessel fit into that? And just like, how do you hope to evolve, whether it's within this category or basically to supersede and go beyond this category altogether?
Yeah, this is really interesting. That was fascinating news about Bayes. I had to take a quick look. I think it's just a great thing for, humankind, for us to be able to track things at home and understand what's going on inside our body, and then be able to make improvements to that. I think it's going to lead to people, sort of performing better day in and day out. And I think it's also going to lead to longevity. I mean, some of the places that this testing is going to go is like early cancer detection. Right from home. And that sounds like science fiction-y, but there's already a bunch of really interesting products, primarily in the academia range, that are already starting to show that if you apply some machine learning to like 4 different markers, they can very accurately detect things like prostate cancer and breast cancer early. These are still in the early stages, but we're talking, 3 to 5 years, this is going to be a reality. And I think that's just, again, really positive for just sort of healthcare as we know it. I think you're seeing a natural progression. I mean, it started, 50 years ago. LabCorp and Quest put, labs everywhere. And so now it's fairly convenient to find a lab near you, but you still have to drive there, go to the doctors and get the order for the lab and all that. So then we got a little bit more convenient when you started to see these at-home collection. So at-home collection is things like 23andMe and Everlywell, where you're still using the lab, but you actually collect the full sample at home, whether it's a blood sample or saliva sample. You mail it to the lab. You didn't have to leave your house, but you still have to wait 3 to 5 days. You still have to pay hundreds of dollars because you're involving the lab. This final stage here is what Vessel's doing. And what Vessel's doing is it doesn't need the lab anymore. It's got the test card, and what it's doing is turning your phone into the lab reader. So what happens if you were to do a urine-based test at a lab? They would, dip a stick in there and put it into a reader. And that reader is pretty expensive and pretty, been around for quite a while. Now we can take a test card you just hold in your hand, and you can scan it with your phone using the camera on your phone combined with some computer vision and machine learning. So luckily we live in an age where both of those technologies are pretty advanced. It can actually read the card as accurately as those giant machines. It already accounts for shadows and glare and potential like little pee droplets and other things that might appear on there, and can give you really accurate results in real time. And so what happens when you do the entire thing at home is, for one, it's just a whole lot easier. I mean, you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to mail anything in. So it's just easier, takes less time. You get the whole, from start to finish, you get your results in under 5 minutes. The other thing is the cost. Because you've cut out the lab now, you don't have to pay that fee. So Everly, Wells, and 23andMe are, 100 to 200 to $300. Ours is, around $10 per test. So it's sort of 10x cheaper. And it's just faster. I mean, I mentioned that before, but you don't have to wait days for your results. You get your results sort of in real time. So it's just been progressing as we normally do as humans. And this final stage where you can get the results affordably and instantly at home is exciting, and it's gonna be a game changer in healthcare as we know it.
For sure. The evolution of this it's happening crazy fast, to your point. I think the other piece, and maybe it's early and you don't want to talk about it from the perspective of Vessel, but maybe if you don't, or if you do, awesome. If you don't, zooming out a little bit and thinking just like how the space evolves, there are so many different tests and devices and wearables. And, even when you start to extend that into, where these data sets are going, it's all very, fractured and kind of siloed, right? So if you think about like a glucose monitor in your lab test, and then another wearable that's tracking performance and heart rate, and then whatever you're doing throughout the day, nutrition or fitness wise, how do you think of yourself as potentially building this platform and being a consolidator? And if you don't want to go down that path, I guess the alternative path is like, how do you see it playing out in terms of bringing all of this information together in a way where it's actionable and streamlined, and not, people trying to sit at home and figure it out by themselves?
Yeah. So we take a slightly different approach here than I think a lot of companies are in the space. I won't name names, but some of the companies are very protective of their data, and they won't let users export it. And they don't do a lot of partnerships with other companies where you could combine the data sets and see really interesting things. We, on the other hand, are going to be very open with the data. It's up to the user what they want to do with that data. And, our mission, very, very, if you really, hear it out, is a lab in every hand. It's not an app in every hand that tells you, these recommendations and things. So if we find a partner that has a really interesting app that millions of people love to use, we actually are building an SDK that would allow them to bring the Vessel experience into their app. You still have to use the Vessel test card. That's the lab piece of it. You still have to use our scanning technology, but that you get that through the SDK. But we want to get this test card into as many hands as possible. So whatever app that you want to use, and we're talking to some massive at scale apps, they can bring that whole experience in there. We want to really hone in and focus on the test card that we're building, getting into blood and getting into all kinds of different things, so that Vessel is the way that you get the data about what's going on inside your body into either our own app or into another app that you use. And we also want to focus on the recommendation engine, because that's a lot of what these partners are pulling in, is those recommendations and being able to display those to their users. I think it's going to stay fairly fragmented because there are so many different solutions to capturing data. But generally speaking, consumers will find the one that works really well for them and probably use that the majority of the time. And it'll be different depending on the consumer. I think if you look at social media, you see the same kind of thing. I think it'll be a bit more fragmented on the healthcare side, but on that side, you've got Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. And, some people love to use LinkedIn because they're more business focused, and other people love to use Facebook, a little bit older demo. And then, the younger demographics on TikTok instead of Instagram and Snapchat. I mean, it's already fragmented just on that side. And I think you'll see a bit more fragmentation here, but there'll be a perfect thing for you as a user, the one that you love the most. And we want to make sure that Vessel is the way that you get the urine analysis, the blood analysis, into those apps, whether it's our own app or somebody else's. That's our strategy.
Yeah, the integration piece, I think, will be interesting to see, and certainly a super smart strategy as that plays out. As we get to the tail end of the conversation here, if we were to look ahead and you think about, it's early in 2021 right now, I think just given an early stage company, it's, even though you guys have been at it for a while, to look ahead years and try to predict what's going to happen, it's, kind of impossible. So even if we push out a year, thinking about the goals and ambitions you have, what has to play out or what do you hope plays out in 2021?
For us in 2021, we have incredible demand that we just need to fulfill. So it's all about ramping manufacturing to keep up with demand and doing so in a way that maintains the efficacy and the accuracy of the test cards. And so that's the number one focus for us, which is really interesting because in my previous companies, the first year of operations was really focused on creating demand and product market fit and that sort of thing. And we have a different problem here, which is we got to build more cards faster and do so in a really controlled way that again maintains that efficacy. So that's our focus. It's quality at scale. And so I hope, that by the end of this year, we're producing, 400 or 500,000 test cards per month that are of the highest quality. And so our consumers are, absolutely loving it. And we're off to the races. We've sort of proven out the business at scale or at a decent scale and ready to move into some of the, deeper R&D like blood tests in 2022 and hardware in 2022 and some of those other exciting ways you can kind of expand the business.
Yeah, we touched on it. It's quite the problem to have there, just trying to keep up with demand. That'll be really great to see, I'm sure, on your side as you continue to scale that up. And I think just as we wrap up here, and we'll actually get you out here on this, I'm not sure that you need the influx of demand at this point, but I'm sure just given this conversation, folks will be interested in learning more and following along. What's the best place for people to keep up with what you're working on in Vessel?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are, open to, with our SDK, bringing this into other people's apps. So anyone that owns a business that's sort of wellness or health related, which is probably a lot of people, you can reach out to us to see about bringing the Vessel experience into your product through partnerships at vesselhealth.com. If you go to vesselhealth.com, you'll see a link for partnerships in the navigation, or you can just email us directly. And we'd love to talk to you about working together. Yeah, we're very open over here.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you making time today, Jon. It's a really interesting space. Certainly now with the traction you guys have, it'll be awesome to follow. So I appreciate you making time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Joe.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. For more from Fit Insider, visit insider.fit.co and subscribe to our weekly newsletter for insights and analysis on the business of fitness and wellness. Then go ahead and subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. See you next time.